Hey YouTube, how's everyone doing today? So, I'm just out at my local park. I like to go out, listen to audiobooks, jog, hike, and just think about things, think about life, contemplate different ideas and everything. And recently I've been thinking about making a video on individualism and like individualism in regard to like responsibility. And I've been thinking about making this video, like I said, for a while, and just not had the time. But also too, I've been trying to compile my thoughts, so I'm not just rambling pretty much. But I'm going to give my best shot, see how it goes, and may make a few other videos on similar topics to this, different sociological, philosophical type ideas. So anyway, let's get into it. So, like all good arguments or whatever, you have to define your terms first, or generally speaking, you have to define your terms. And for purposes of this video, I'm going to define individualism, and I know there's a lot of different ways you could kind of take individualistic philosophy, I guess you could say, but I'm going to define individualism primarily as the idea that is primarily concerned with individual, I know you can't use the word, but individual people's freedom and autonomy within a society. So I know that's kind of a fairly broad definition, but from what I've read, that's fairly accurate as to how to define it. So, and secondly, responsibility. So responsibility is a fairly easy word to define, but again, as I'll show in this video, it has, at least in an individualistic framework, a pretty specific idea. And responsibility, I guess you could say, is a general idea where you are obligated to oneself or others to do some sort of action or not to do something, an action. So, with those two definitions in mind, I think what I'm basically trying to do in this video is critique an aspect of individualism that I think is becoming, I don't know if harmful is the right word, but I guess that's the only word that comes close to it, but harmful. And basically what I'm trying to say, again, this is kind of my conclusion, and then I'll support my conclusion, I guess, is that responsibility is becoming a tyrannical force within an individualistic worldview. So in the West, individualism is pretty much one of the primary ideas. It's pretty much fundamental to the West, I guess you could say. And because of that, we see responsibility as something that is very integral to individualism. And because of that, like I said, individualism is creating a form of tyranny out of responsibility. So, okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, I guess first off, when people think of tyranny, they usually think of a government or some, again, external force that is forcing people to do something. That is, pretty much the accepted, I guess you could say, general broad way of seeing tyranny. But we forget that tyranny can be an idea, and it can be an idea that is so subtle that it's accepted, like the idea of responsibility. Like, okay, so everybody is responsible first to themselves and then others, depending on their situation or life. And we accept that so fundamentally as a truth, as a basic axiom, that we don't question it. And when we don't question it, we start to see how that idea slowly, over time, gains more and more weight. And before you know it, we think every aspect, and I'm being as broad as I can when I say this, every aspect of an individual person's life is solely their responsibility. Now, on the surface of it, some people say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem with it is throughout history, whether you look at really any civilization, you can't go too far, any civilization sees individual people, generally speaking, again, as part of some sort of group, whole, or society. And because of that, they are, indebted to a higher calling, whatever that is, within that society. But in an individualistic framework, people are indebted to themselves. And what that means is, like I said, because every aspect of their life is now their responsibility for themselves becomes their own tyranny. And the reason that's an issue is because, especially so in America where I live, everybody says freedom and rights. Okay, that's the big thing. You gotta have freedom to pursue what you want in life as long as you don't hurt other people. Okay, that's great. But what we so often forget is that most people, before they even get to the idea of freedom, have responsibilities just to live, just to survive, really, if you want to get really bare bones practical with it, that hinder them from either exploring or even finding those freedoms to do what they want, help other people, help themselves, whatever. And because of that, those responsibilities become the tyranny. So it's not a government, it's not even a religion per se or whatever. It's that common notion of responsibility that hurts and hinders people. So I guess a good example of this, I don't know this is a great example, but I'll try it out. But so the idea of responsibility is kind of like watering a plant. Okay. You gotta have, or most plants obviously take water. They need water to live, survive, all the basic chemical functions. Okay. Similar to responsibility. You have to be responsible to yourself and others to be able to live, to be able to do whatever you want to do with life. But in the West, under an individualistic framework, we've become so obsessed, and I say that intentionally, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic when I say this, so obsessed, whether it's, say Western films or literature, anywhere you turn, you always see the individual going up against some sort of a system. But we don't see how that system is actually the systems of responsibility just to live that's actually hurting people. And like I said, with the water and plant analogy or metaphor, I always get those two confused. If you start to overwater a plant, it's going to die. Like if you put, again, I don't know how many gallons and gallons of water in a little plant, it's going to get mold or whatever and die. And just like with responsibility, the more and more we shift the burden of responsibility from society to the individual, we create this kind of social mold, I guess you could say, that infects individual people and doesn't allow them to grow, meaning express their freedom. So just like a plant, too much water, the mold starts to grow and they can't live and thrive and grow. Just like too much responsibility, the more responsibility you have, the person becomes stifled and can't access that freedom that we're supposedly given in America, generally speaking. And because of that, very quick summary or conclusion, because of that, I think we need to kind of redefine how we see responsibility within not just individualism, but the West, because it really is becoming more and more of a negative force that, generally speaking, I'm not saying responsibility is completely bad. I know some people would like to make that as a criticism, maybe against this argument, but generally speaking, we put too much weight on individual responsibility and basically end up hurting people and taking away their freedom, not from the government, not from religion per se, but from that simple idea of overextending responsibility. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video. And like I said, I'm going to try to do a series of videos similar to this on different topics. So I'll see how it goes. But anyway, thanks for watching and maybe subscribe. Bye.